welcome to the second module of the MOOC course on solid and hazardous waste management. Today in this module we will be discussing about the waste sources and its generation rates. Before going into the module, let us see what is actually waste. Materials that are abandoned, unwanted or that do not possess any further use are termed as waste, which are generally disposed to the outside environment. Now, this waste, depending upon their property, they are classified as solid, liquid and gaseous waste. Now, wastes are generated from the human and the animal activities. Population growth, urbanization and the rapid advancement in industrialization has resulted in generation of huge amount of waste. Now, this waste has been disposed of into the outside environment without any protection. This causes a lot of effects on the environment and on the health of an individual. So, to avoid this, you need a proper waste management plan. To formulate a better or good waste management plan, it is essential for us to understand the waste sources, which we will be studying in this particular module. Now, as I told you, the term solid waste refers to useless or unwanted and non-liquid material that has no longer value to the owner, who is liable for it. The waste generation rate depends or varies from community to community, from country to country, depending on various factors like the lifestyle of human being, financial status or the economic background, industrial structure, techniques and technologies used. In general, if you want to study the sources of solid waste generation, there are many types of sources, starting from your residential source, industrial source, institutional source, commercial source, construction and demolition source, municipal source and treatment plant sites. Now, let us look into these major sources one by one. To begin with, first the residential waste. Now, as you all know, what is a residential waste? Residential waste is nothing but waste that is generally generated from the household areas. It can also include the garden waste, the lawns which are there in the households, or a small kitchen garden which is popular among the urban environment. It will also include waste such as the bulky waste. Bulky waste you might have studied in the previous module. Bulky waste is nothing but waste which are of huge size, like the furnitures, refrigerators, sofa sets, etc. Household waste also includes some amount of hazardous and non-hazardous waste. They are generally generated from a single family or a multi-family or a single family housing. Generally, these wastes are composed of both organic as well as inorganic constituents. Now, who are the generators of this residential waste? They are the tenants or the owners of the house, who is responsible for the generation as well as responsible for the disposal of the solid waste. The second source from where the solid waste is generated is the commercial waste. Now, commercial waste originates from sources like the shopping malls, marriage halls, shopping complexes, cinema theatres, restaurants, hotels, motels and other sources. Now, it consists of both combustible as well as non-combustible waste. Now, the customers, site managers, owners, they are responsible for the generation as well as disposal of this type of waste. The third source is the institutional waste. Now, institutional waste, as the term mentions, it is the waste that is generated from the public and government organizations. Example, schools, colleges, hospitals, offices and other research organizations. Now, this too consists of both combustible and non-combustible waste. I am sure you understand what is combustible and non-combustible. Combustible means ones that can be burnt. The next source which we are going to discuss about is the industrial waste. Now, industrial wastes are generated from various locations. It might be a small scale industry, a cottage industry or a large scale industry. Now, the waste generated from these industries can vary or depend on the nature of the industry. For example, heavy metal, oil, paints, lubricants, dyes and other like the ashes are some of the products that are released at the end of the industrial process. The waste generated can be of organic nature or inorganic nature, and it can also be hazardous. They are toxic to the environment as well as to the human life and the animals, hence they should be segregated and handled separately. The end products that are released from the large scale industries are used as a raw material for the small scale industries. Now, who are responsible for the generation as disposal? It is obviously the employer and the employee who is in charge or responsible for the generation and the proper disposal of the solid waste. The next major source is the agricultural waste. As you all know, India is an agricultural country and it generates a huge amount of agricultural waste. The waste that are derived from crop and plants, harvesting, waste accumulated in orchards and vineyards, production of animals for slaughter are collectively known as agricultural waste. In several locations, the public face a lot of problem in disposal of the animal manure. Now, it is again the renter and the proprietor is answerable for the proper disposal of solid waste. Here the renter or the proprietor would be those who are owning these farms or domesticating these animals. The next major source is the municipal services. Now, municipal waste is not from one single source. It is generally called as a commingled waste, and it can be from a residential area, it can be from a commercial area, it can be from any industrial area. So, it is just a mixture of all types of waste that is called as a municipal waste. Now, in addition to that, the road or street sweepings and waste that is generated from the parks, gardens and those that are stored in the communal containers, or the waste that is generated during the landscaping and other dead animals or automobile parts which are discarded on the roadside, all these come under the municipal services or municipal waste. Now, this again, if you look into the constituents, they will be organic and inorganic substances. Organic example, food waste, paper, plastic, glass, etc. And inorganic will be mostly the dust or debris or silt or sand materials that are generated during the street sweepings. Now, also the public places, the waste that is generated from these public places like bus stands, railway stations, airports, all come under this municipal service waste. The generators and the person who is responsible for the disposal of this type of waste would be the municipality labourer, municipality staff and other government official who generate the waste would be responsible. The last type of source is the treatment plant side. In the first module, you might have seen that the sludge that is generated from the water and wastewater treatment plants or the air quality control devices are generally categorized as the solid waste. The solid and semi-solid waste from the wastewater treatment plant, common effluent plant and industrial treatment plants are collectively termed as the treatment plant facility. So, again it mainly consists of the organic matter, that is the sludge, which is generally biodegradable, but in case if it is from a chemical industry or it is a chemical sludge, then it contains more amount of chemicals and other inorganic components. Now, if it is a biodegradable one, I mean generated from a domestic or a sewage treatment plant, then it can act as a substrate for generating energy, okay, by using the sludge in a biogas plant, and the process involved would be the wet fermentation called as the anaerobic digestion. Now, the plant technician or the plant manager or site supervisor who is in charge of the treatment plant would be responsible for the disposal of this type of waste. Construction and demolition waste are also a major sector from which a large quantity of solid waste is generated. Now, construction activities like building a house, factory, apartment, institution, all these requires a huge amount of raw material. During this, after construction or during the process of construction, the excess of these materials which is left out or which is not being used are included under the construction waste. Likewise, demolition activities like when you destroy or destruct a building also results in the generation of huge amount of waste. Like destruction activities like destructing a bridge, building, sidewalks, broken out streets, all these things result in the generation of waste. When you talk about the construction waste, it is just the solidified cement, broken tiles or broken stones or broken bricks, they are all construction waste. When you talk about the demolition waste, it will include the steel, concrete and electrical wirings, broken plastics, glass, reinforced steel, etc. Now again, the workers or the site supervisor or project managers are answerable for the proper disposal of this type of solid waste. Now this table will summarize the different sources we have discussed so far. What is the type of facility from which these wastes are generated. It will enlist the types of waste generated from each source, and lastly it will also tell you who is the responsible person for the disposal of this type of waste. So first let us begin with the household waste, household or residential waste. These are generated from a single or multi-family dwelling, from low or high-raised apartments. Now this will generally include food waste, paper, plastic, rubber, cardboard, glass, tin, yard waste, etc. As I told you earlier, the tenant and owners will be responsible for their disposal. The second, the commercial waste, they are generally generated from shopping malls, cinema theatres, complexes and hotels, motels, and the waste, if you see, it will be mostly the glass bottles, tins, paints, oil, food waste, paper, plastic, rubber, leather, etc. and especially it will be more rich in the packaging materials. Customer, site manager and owner of these commercial complexes will be responsible for their proper disposal. When you talk about the institutional waste, again as I told you earlier, these are generated from the schools, colleges, government hospitals, research organizations and so on. It will again include paper, plastic, cardboard, wood, food waste and medicinal waste. One thing in the institutional waste is the medical waste or the biomedical waste also comes under the institutional waste. But the only thing is the management of biomedical waste or the treatment or processing should be done at the source of generation, and the residue that comes out, especially incineration is used. After incineration, the ash that is left out is then taken off and then mixed with the municipal solid waste and then it is disposed of. Okay. So, the students, staff, doctor, patients and head of the institution is responsible for the disposal of the institutional waste. The next category of waste is the industrial waste. Now, as I told you, this industrial category can include both a small scale industry, a large scale industry or a cottage industry. So, light, heavy metal or electroplating industry all will be included under the industrial sector. The examples of the products or the waste that is generated from the industrial sector, if you see, they can be steel scrap, paper, plastic, cardboards, wood and other hazardous substances like zinc, chromium, mercury, etc., which is generally used in an electroplating process. As I told you earlier, the employee as well as employer of the industries are responsible for the disposal of this industrial waste. Next category, it is the agricultural waste. This we have discussed much in detail, and as I told you, the vineyards, orchards, agriculture fields are the source from which these wastes are generated, and the waste will include the pesticides, the crop residues, the stubble and all those things. Okay. So, the farm owner or any renter will be responsible for the disposal of this particular waste. The treatment plant also we have already discussed. From the STPs or ETPs, the sludge that is generated is put under this category, and this will mainly include the sludge, sand, digested waste, coal, coke, etc. And plant manager or the site supervisor will be responsible for the disposal of this particular waste. Again, municipal services, this again we have discussed much, and as I told you, these it is a commingled waste, and the source of this particular waste you cannot designate it or separate it. It can be from a residential area, it can be from a institutional area, anything. It's just a mixed source of waste. Now again it can be leaf, food waste, plastic and other street sweepings, silt, sand, etc. And the responsible person for proper disposal would be the laborer, staff or government officials. The last category, the construction and demolition waste, those which are generated from the construction site or the demolition site, which can be the dust, steel, wood, concrete, dirt, paints, wires, broken windows, glasses, etc. And again the site manager, project managers and the workers who are there will be responsible for the disposal of this particular waste. With this as a basis, now we will discuss about the waste generation rate. Now what is waste generation rate? The rate of solid waste generation with time is called as rate of solid waste generation. The waste generation again, it depends on the nature of or the lifestyle of people, economic background, it will vary from country to country, community to community, and also it will depend on the sources. So the characteristics, quantity, volume and the composition of the solid waste generated may differ from country to country, and also the urban and rural environment also will determine the rate of waste generation. As I told you earlier, population plays an important role in determining the rate of waste generation. NEERI in 1995 have given the per capita waste generation by people in one day. According to the data, 0.1 to 0.5 million will result in the generation of 210 grams per capita per day of waste, and 0.5 to 1 million will produce 250, 1 to 2 million will result in the generation of 270 gram per capita per day, 2 to 5 will generate 350 gram per capita per day, and above 5 million they will generate waste of around 500 gram per capita per day. Similarly, the CPCB in 2011 has provided a list of cities and the respective municipal solid waste generation for the year 1999 to 2000, 2004 to 2005 and 2010 to 2011. According to the table, if you see, as usual the metro cities or the metropolitan cities generate a high amount of waste, starting from Delhi ranks number 1, followed by Mumbai, Chennai, Hyderabad, Bangalore and Kolkata, and the least waste generating cities include the Kavarati which is a union territory, Kavarati, followed by Gangtok and Jamshedpur. So if you see, with increase in year, the amount of waste generation in tons per day keeps increasing, and the reason would be the population growth, urbanization and industrialization. Now how do you estimate the quantity or the quantum of solid waste generated from each source or each locality or individual state, district or country? This is generally done by a survey method. You can estimate the quantity of this waste based on the basis of data collected by a survey method and also by characterizing the solid waste composition. Also you can take the data from previous statistical report on solid waste. There are 3 ways of estimating the waste generation rate. One is your load count analysis, second weight volume analysis, and third one is material balance analysis. Generally solid waste can be measured based on both weight as well as volume, but more appropriately weight is used because the volume tends to change with what I mean to say is the volume will be different for a loose waste and volume will be different for a compacted waste. So always it is better for you to take the weight of the solid waste. If you are taking volume, then it is essential for us to note down the specific weight. In the load count method, it is generally the number of loads a truck is carrying or the number of loads a vehicle, a particular collection vehicle is noted down, the weight or the number of loads is noted down, along with the waste characteristics is noted down, and with that the load count analysis is done for a specified or a stipulated period of time. Now, in the weight volume analysis, it is done by measuring the volume of solid waste that is collected in the truck, and it is weighed for each load, and then the amount of solid waste is calculated based on the number of load, weight, volume, etc. The third type of method used for measuring the quantum of solid waste or the solid waste generation rate is the material mass balance analysis. In the material mass balance analysis, the mass of the solid waste is analyzed within a system boundary. Now, here what is accumulated, what is coming in, what is moving out, and also the rate of generation is included, so that the quantum of solid waste generation can be calculated. So, this figure 2 will show you how the inflow of raw material is calculated, also the outflow of material as well as product will be calculated. Then any emissions like the combustion gases or ashes will be taken into account, and the outflow in terms of solid waste will be taken, and within the system boundary it will be recorded as raw material, products and solid waste. Now, when you take into all these things into account, you can do the mass balance analysis. So, the equation given below will help you in calculating or analyzing the material mass balance analysis. First, to identify the rate of accumulation of material within the system boundary is given by the rate of inflow of material within the system minus rate of outflow of material within the system, then plus or minus the rate of generation within the system boundary. In a simplified form, you can write it as accumulation is equal to inflow minus outflow plus or minus generation. Symbolically, this is represented as dm by dt is equal to sum of mass inflow minus sum of mass outflow plus or minus W. Now, dm by dt is the rate of change of mass of material within the controlled volume or system boundary. Em inflow, it will be sum of inflow of every material that comes into the system. Em outflow will be the sum of outflow of every material that goes out or leaves the system, and the last one would be the rate of change of mass of waste generation within the controlled volume or system boundary, and the units are given there. When would you determine that the rate of generation is positive or negative? If the rate of generation within the system boundary is higher than the rate of decay, then you give it as a positive sign, and if the decay within the system is higher than the generation rate, then you give it as a negative sign. Now, let us look into a simple problem by how you can calculate the amount of solid waste generated per week from a particular area or a residential complex. Now, the problem is using the following data, calculate the quantity of solid waste generated per week for a city residential area that consists of 5,000 homes. The data is given in the table, like the number of vehicles, number of trips, volume and the specific weight. Okay. So, now let us see how to solve this problem. First, what you have to do is just like the table which is formulated here, you can also do it. Just put it again the number of vehicle in the same table, you can add one more column to calculate the total quantity. Now, I will tell you how to calculate the total quantity. Total quantity in kilograms will be given by the formula which is given here. Number of trip into volume in meter cube into specific weight. That means, how do you calculate the total quantity of waste? You can multiply the number of trip. I mean, for the first, let us take the for vehicle number 1. Number of trip is 15 into volume. Let us take the example of first vehicle. Now, the formula says it is the number of trip into volume into specific weight. So, for the first vehicle, 15 is the number of trip that it has undertaken. So, 15 into, for one trip the volume is 10. So, 15 into 10 into the specific weight is 280 kilogram per meter cube. So, if you multiply this, you will get a value of 42,000 kg. And for the second vehicle, it will be 20 trips into 8 volume into 210 as a specific weight. The value will be 33,600. So on you can calculate whatever is given in the table. Now at the end you add all the total quantity and you will get the total amount of waste generated by all the 3 vehicles. So this will give you the total quantity of waste in kilograms. But now what we have to find out is the per capita waste generation. Now how will you achieve that? So to determine the quantity of solid waste generated, okay, I mean per capita per day or per person. So what you have to do is you take the total quantity in kg and divide by number of homes into number of person per home into number of days. Now let us assume one house will have only 2 adults and 1 child. So that is 2.5 people per home. The child is considered as half here. Okay. So if you calculate, if you take the total quantity, that is 1,71,600, which is obtained from the first earlier table, you put that and divide it by 5,000, which is the number of houses or home in that particular area, and multiply by 2.5 into 7. 7 will be 7 days in a week. So if you divide that, you will arrive at a value 1.9611 kilogram per capita per day. So for a residential area having 500 houses, the per capita waste generation will be 1.9611 kilogram per capita per day. So far we discussed about the various sources from which the waste was generated or is being generated. Then we discussed about the rate of waste generation, how to calculate the quantity of waste generation by 3 different methods. Now we will discuss about the various factors that influence or play an important role in determining the quantum of waste generation. The factors include geographical location, seasons, climatic condition, socio-economic background, legislation, waste reduction at source, reduce, reuse, recycling and degree of recycling. So the first factor, geographical location. How does a geographical location influence the quantum of waste generation? For example, if your town or village is located on a higher altitude, maybe on a hill station, the materials which is available in the urban area or in the metro area or normally in a plain area will not be easily available for people who are living in the higher altitude or hill stations. So that will act like a limitation for the waste generation. Likewise, you can also compare area which is completely isolated from other areas. For example, like in a mega city or a metro city, the amount of the materials which are available, the facilities or the materials available will be very high, and this will again lead to the high amount of waste generation, which is not so in a isolated area like you can talk about an island. So that is one example of a geographical location. Second factor is a season. Now how season will determine your waste generation? For example, like you have in India we experience only 3 different seasons like the summer, winter and the spring. Autumn you cannot see, but in the foreign countries or the European or the western countries you can experience autumn season too. Normally what happens after winter, okay, there is the leaf fall will be there. So during the fall you find a lot of yard waste generation. So that leads to the generation of high amount of leaf litter. So that is one example of season. To take another example, you can have the harvest season. If you talk about the harvest season, the amount of crop residues or leftover grains, spoiled grains, husk, these are all generated in a higher quantity. So that can be another example for season. The third factor would be your climatic condition. Now climatic condition influences the amount of waste generation to a greater level. In places where you have a very hot or humid climate, the temperature will be high. Now when you have a lot of high temperature, the waste degradation will be much faster when compared to the cooler climate. So in that case, the amount of the waste collection frequency should be increased much further. So, in a climatic condition like in a summer, you have to even if you are buying vegetables, it has to be fresh. If you store it, it gets wasted. So, when excess of vegetables that gets spoiled, you have to throw it much faster. So, that will lead to more amount of waste generation. The next factor is the socio-economic background. Socio-economic background is nothing but the economical status of individual, of a country or a locality. The quantity of waste generation is high in high class community when compared to a middle or low class community, because in a high class community they keep changing things because it becomes a status symbol. So, they keep changing things, thereby resulting in high amount of waste generation. Likewise, they keep changing or they use a lot of gadgets and electronic devices, thereby resulting in high amount of waste generation. Even the packaging materials are highly generated or used up by the high class society. So, that is why the amount of waste generation is high in a high income group or high economic status when compared to a middle or low economic status. The public attitude is also one another factor which will influence the amount of waste generation. Literate group or people who are more aware of the environmental effects or who care more about the environment will take care of the environment and they will minimize the waste generation. So, the public attitude plays an important role there. Next, legislation. Unless and until you have strict laws being framed for the management of waste, people will not care for disposing the waste properly or to minimize the waste generation or to recycle or reuse them. So, regulation should be as strict as possible to avoid the quantum of waste generation. The next important factor is waste reduction at source. An individual who is throwing the waste or who is using the waste, if he is aware of the facts or about the disturbances that is created during the waste disposal, then he can reduce it at the source. For example, instead of buying the materials which are already available, you can use them, you can try to reuse them. As I told you, the paper, one-sided paper can be reused so that you can minimize the waste at the source. Even likewise, you can also avoid the use of unnecessary packaging materials. When you are going to a food outlet, you can carry your own carriers or tiffin boxes and then you can pack the materials, or you can minimize the extent of packaging material required. Also, when you go to the market for buying some vegetables or provisions, you can carry your own bags rather than taking up the plastic bags or buying plastic bags from the outlets. This will also play a role in reducing the waste generation at the source. Also, you can use materials that are highly durable and easily repairable, so that the life of the material will be extended and you do not have to buy items repeatedly, thereby it will minimize the waste generation at the source. Next, reduce. Reduce is also important factor by which you can minimize the waste generation. For example, disposable goods like paper, plastic cups, styrofoam cups, plastic spoons, then these tissue papers, napkins and all these materials can be replaced with durable goods like the ceramic plates, metal spoons, glass cups instead of the paper cups. You can use the cloth towels for cleaning and you can wash it so that it can be reused. So, this also acts as one way of reducing the amount of waste. They say if you recover 1 ton of paper, you can save almost 17 trees. Reuse is also another factor that can help you in minimize the quantum of waste generation in a particular area. Instead of buying new containers or new materials for your house repeatedly, you can clean them and reuse them. Even if you want to throw them, you can use it as some other materials. For example, you can if you want to throw your cup which is of which you do not want to use it any further, you can convert it into a pen stand or any other stand so that you can use it as a storing device. Same way, instead of using this soft drink bottles, you can have a plastic bottles and then use it for filling up bottles, and you can carry it wherever you go, and then you can fill the water in these bottles rather than buying these mineral water bottles. The next one, recycling. When you recycle the broken materials or you can reprocess them by giving it to the manufacturer, that will also reduce the quantum of waste generation. For example, paper, you can collect all the paper, give it to the paper factory or manufacturing unit, they will recycle it, and then they will give a product of recycled product which can be used. Likewise, the glass and plastic can also be sent to the respective industry, and you can use it back. This will minimize the waste generation. Also, the extent of recycling or the degree of recycling also plays an important role. Now, when you extend the life period of a product, you can use it for a long period of time. For example, the rechargeable batteries, you can buy rechargeable batteries and keep charging it, and you can use it for many times till its life is lost. And another example can be the high class community, as a status symbol, they keep using their electronic devices like mobile phones, tablets, laptop, computers. Now, what they can do is, instead of keeping it at their home, they can either sell it at a low price to some other person, or they can give it back to the respective company. For example, in recent times you might have seen in advertisements like the Flipkart and the Amazon, they have given like you exchange, if you want to buy a new laptop, you can exchange the old laptop and then buy. This is one sort of environmental responsibility which the company is supposed to abide by. So, if you do so, you can minimize the amount of electronic waste generation. So, to summarize, at the end of this module, you might have been clear about the various sources from where the waste is being generated. You might also been clear, or you might have understood what is the rate of waste generation and how it depends on various factors like population, customs, economic status, then country, geographical location, season, etc. We also discussed like how to calculate the quantity of waste generation. We discussed about the 3 different methods by which you can calculate the quantity of waste generation or the waste generation rates, that is the load count or the weight volume or the mass balance method, material mass balance method. Then we discussed each of the factors that influence waste generation in detail. Lastly, we discussed about the different factors which influence the waste generation in detail. I hope this module would be of help to you. Thank you.